could say anything, like just you're just talking, like everyone watching this video, what you would want them to know.
Is God cares about you specifically. The basic Bible idiom, Jesus loves you, is the truth. So I'm a construction worker, and I work on bridges primarily, and I was working on a bridge in Mosby, Missouri, near Mosby. It's on 69 highway over a railroad, and I was putting in what we call silt fence, and I was working down below the bridge, and the silt fence would collect the dirt out of the rainwater so we don't pollute the water stream. And at any rate, it requires digging a ditch and putting some stakes in, and then filling back over the top of it so it doesn't wash away. And it was really hot that day, and I was getting near the end, and I was on if it wasn't the last stake, it was the one before the last. It was really close to the last one. And I was hot. I needed a drink, but it was almost lunchtime, and the water was on the top of the bridge, and it required a lot of, it required actually stopping what I was doing and going to get a drink. So anyways, I thought I'd just finish, and I got to, I believe it was the last stake. If not, it was the one right. It was the last stake. And my right arm had cramped up on me. I was swinging a sledgehammer with my right arm, and it cramped up. So I switched arms, and I missed the stake. And when I did, the sledgehammer came all the way back around and hit me in the arm. And I don't know if it just pulled my wrist out of place, or I felt it pop. Whatever it was, I felt it, and I heard it. It was audible, and obviously it hurt. And so I come from a church that, of course, I believe in the power of God to heal, and I come from a church where the members believe that. And so the first thing I did in the moment was I prayed. I asked the Lord to heal it, and of course it wasn't healed, and it still hurt. And I was able to finish that stake with my other arm. And I remember I walked, when I got to the top of the bridge, it was lunchtime, and the foreman on the job, I said, "Man, Gary, I twisted the snot out of my wrist down there." And he said, "Well, do you want to write it up?" And I was like, "No, I'll be all right." Thinking I'm a young guy, I'm a quick healer, that sort of thing. And so we didn't write it up. And we were on a specific kind of job. And if you didn't write up an injury the minute it happened, your job was held against you. They were going to fire you and your foreman. They were firing anyone who was involved, anybody who knew about it and didn't write it up in the moment. It was very strict on the rules. And I knew that, and I still didn't want to write it up. It's almost, I didn't want to write it up. So anyways, I was able to limp through the rest of the day. The bridge was essentially done. We were just doing minor details to clean the job up. And so I was able to kind of limp through the rest of the day. And by the time I got home, I could tell there was something seriously wrong. Something wasn't right. And again, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what it was, but it hurt. It obviously hurt. And so I got up the next morning, and I limped through the rest of the evening, obviously. And I got up the next morning. I thought I'd go fishing, and I got out there and I cast with my right. I got my bait on. I cast this thing out there, and I couldn't hold my fishing pole to reel it in, and that's when I knew I had a problem, because it was the next day. If it was going to self-heal, it should have done some work overnight, and it hadn't, and I was scared. That's what I was. So I went back to my car, and I didn't want to go home and wake everybody in the house up, so I went back to my car and I read my Bible, and of course I prayed again, and I was worried. So I remember when I did go home, I probably read my Bible that day till 10 o'clock. And when I did finally go home, I remember I was in tears talking to my wife, because I had the only job, and we couldn't afford 8 weeks of no money. I had 4 kids, and it was 8 weeks off was too much. And so I was in tears talking to my wife, and my only thought was, I need to go to church. I just kept thinking, there's power in prayer. And so the next morning, of course, the next day was Sunday. Of course, I was unable to do much of anything Saturday. So the next day was Sunday, and I had gotten up and I went to church like I always do, and I recall the church would occasionally have Holy Spirit services, what we would call them, and the Spirit would just call out for anyone who needed prayer. So this just coincidentally was one of those services. I was in need of prayer, and so when the pastor called for anybody in need of prayer, 4 or 5 other people got up. So I kind of hovered to the back. I don't know, I kind of had this sense of unworthiness, like I don't know, like I wasn't worthy to be in the front of the line. And so I was going to hover to the back and just wait for everybody else to get prayed for. And then if there was time left, maybe there was space for me. And so as I'm hovering, I'm about halfway down the aisle, the pastor stops kind of in the middle of praying for somebody, and he comes back and he says, "What is going on?" And so of course I told him, and he said, "Well, let's lift your hands up and just give thanks to God." And so I did, and he was praying, and then when he put his hand on my arm, I remember there was this feeling of, it was instant. It was this feeling of, it was almost like electricity is the only reference point I have. But really, I would call it power. I mean, power is a good definition for it. But I have no reference for what I felt. It was a tangible, I felt at the time, an energy, if you will. And so, for me, it was instant, and I knew I was healed. I didn't have to ask. I didn't ask the pastor what was going on. I didn't have to ask anybody. I didn't even have to ask God. I knew I was healed. It was as if, I don't know, I just knew I was healed. I didn't have to, I don't even know any other way to put that. I've prayed for people before, and I've had them ask, did it work? And I didn't have to ask. I knew without a shadow of a doubt. It was instant. And so I went on, and of course I gave my testimony that morning, but I went on, and the next day I was working on a bridge in Leavenworth. We were doing some rehab work, and I would not have been able to work the next day because we had to climb off the side of the bridge on a single metal ladder, and I wouldn't have even been able to hold on to it to climb the ladder had I not been healed. And of course, for me personally, it changed my life. I mean, it's the second most defining factor of my life. Number one being my salvation. The day I was saved, the moment I was saved. Obviously, I can't tell you the date or time, but I can tell you the moment. I remember in the moment. And so this is the second most defining day of my life, because for me personally, it answered questions that I didn't even know were questions. At the time, I believed in God. I've seen people prayed for. I've seen them healed. I've heard the testimonies, but you could almost say I was living on blind faith. I was living on faith, but it wasn't even blind because I'd seen it happen to other people. But as I stated earlier, I didn't feel worthy. It's like I don't know how else to even describe that, because as a church member, as a child of God, I didn't even feel worthy to ask the Father for help. And I look back at that moment now and I think, well, that's preposterous. It doesn't even make sense. But that is how I felt. That's what I thought. And all those questions that were floating out there, it answered, not only is God real? The first question that everybody thinks they have in faith is God real? And I've got that nailed down because my Bible tells me so. And but it may not always be as nailed down as you think. I would have called myself a believer. And that question was answered in an instant. Not only is God real, but the God who made the heavens and earth, He cares about me. He cares about whether my family can eat. He cares about my wife, my kids. He cares about my everyday life, my personal life. And it's unbelievable to think that God, the God, however you want to look at, however you look at God in your own way, God cares about me. And as a construction worker, it's unfathomable.